Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas, other stuff like comedies and stuff like that fall underneath this banner as well. But for today's episode, I'm going to talk about this series premiere of Chitose is in the Ramune bottle. Great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode. So let's break it down. So I love the opening of this episode, especially because we kind of cut to what is essentially like the multitude of our main core cast of characters, it seems. And kind of like that blue hue that's encapsulating everything, and obviously like the themes and the elements kind of revolving around blue. Just thought that was like beautifully done. I mean, this show is very beautifully animated, and I think it's just one of those reminders of just like, oh yeah, like because obviously people think of like high like level animation and stuff like that when they think about just, I mean, and myself included. I'm not trying to say like I'm not part of that, of just like, oh, things being beautifully animated, because you're thinking just like, oh, that you really see that for like the very action oriented stuff. That's always been kind of like my close-minded mindset on that. But you kind of realize like, oh yeah, like even like stuff that's just like a comedy romance can be very beautifully animated. Specifically, I'm saying like on the TV show front, I'm sure there's been plenty of instances of that, but it's just like, just of what I've seen has never been that case. It's just kind of like, wow, you put a lot of, but it's, it's also about the heart and care and time you're able to put into something and the studio behind it and stuff like that. But anyway, I'm going on my tangent. Something I think is really interesting too about this series is it has a very like Trails of Cold Steel approach. There you go. There's my obligatory Trails of Cold Steel reference. I can't say for today, at least for the recording, because who knows what else is in store for me for today. But if this is your first time coming across hearing anything I talk about, I reference Trails of Cold Steel a lot because I love the Trails games and I love that world, specifically the Cold Steel games. And so the reason why I'm making that point of reference is this series kind of drops you into like Saku and like the crap ton of girls that are around him. Other characters as well. There's only like two we spend a lot more time with. That's Yuko and Yua. But like obviously we get introduced to a whole bunch of characters, and I think that's so interesting. Because if you're unaware with Trails of Cold Steel, it does a really interesting thing where basically in the prologue, excluding like the very, very beginning, because it's like an in media res thing where you're basically starting like 60% of the way through the story. But like you're introduced to like 9 characters, because that game has like 9 main protagonists. And obviously like you get a little time with them, very much like this episode with some of the other girls that you'll spend a lot of time with. But as the game progresses, you'll spend more time with them and stuff like that and get to know these characters. But it's just like, yeah, kind of, you get thrown into the deep end. What I think is interesting parallel wise is like, at least with Trails of Cold Steel, you're coming into this situation, these characters don't know each other, so you're seeing them build their dynamic and their rapport, versus this where a lot of these people have, all these girls have history with Saku because this is his second year. And I think some of them like Saku probably has a deeper history with some of them than others, or maybe he met them all in the first year, because I like, especially with Yua, I don't know if he knew her prior to high school or whatever, because they're in their second year. So we're coming into these pre-established relationships and dynamics, and obviously the story is going to be about those progressing and growing and changing and developing, sure, but like I said, they're already pre-established. We're not kind of like getting introduced to them one by one. It's like you're kind of being thrown in the middle of like that story that's already in motion, these dynamics that are already in motion. So I just say that's kind of like a neat, just like I said, juxtaposition to like, the frame of reference I have for like Trails of Cold Steel. But either way, getting into it, Saku is a fuckboy, a man whore, which like he's got that reputation. And it's so interesting, like he's kind of got this very like laissez-faire approach, because he even kind of has this perspective of like, if I'm basically not living my life in a very like beautiful manner, I guess a manner which I'm like happy with it, if I'm not like I might as well be dead. It's kind of like his philosophy in life, which is because he seems so laid back, but I think there's going to be the deeper layers of, well, just because he did that doesn't mean he doesn't have his own worries, his own concerns. He seems like the whole suave, like I got everything on lock type of character. Yeah, like he's your protagonist that's surrounded by the ladies in his life, and they kind of give him guff and shit for like his personality, because he's like, yo, I'm athletic, I'm this, I'm that, why would anyone hate me? And then you was like, well, you kind of listed all the reasons why people would, because he is so very charming and charismatic that there are plenty of people who do like him. Like I said, they'll bust his balls about like his quote unquote harem, and then there's other people just who, like we saw in his class this year, people will hate him, and he's fine with with that. He's like, yeah, some people love me, some people hate me. I'm kind of an acquired taste. But him being the way he is around girls, like, I don't know if that's all there is to it. I'm sure that plays a role in it, but his dynamic with all the ladies around him and stuff like that, who all obviously have feelings for him, but he's kind of in that space where, like, he has feelings for them too, but I think he's not willing to just like I said, he leans into the fuck boy of it all, but I think it's like I said, there might be something deeper we just don't know about it, because it seems like he is very introspective, and he has an interesting view on life. Even though he presents himself like a fuckboy, because maybe that's easier. Maybe there's a reason why he found himself in this dynamic. Maybe he's scared to be alone, and this is kind of like a Oprah compensation in a way. I'm throwing a lot of speculation out there on it, But he's going to be the class rep this year. They got the same teacher from last year, who seems to be very laissez-faire. He's not you wouldn't think he'd be the type of teacher that would work at a very privileged school like this. It seems like it's a very like high class, like private school. And now as class rep, Saku is stuck. It seems like he even says like, oh yeah, I'm the teacher's like maid. I have to basically do everything he asks me to. In fact, the teacher like hooks him up with a job this episode. It's like, oh, I need you to check on a student who basically didn't show up for like the third semester of his first year. And it seems like here at the beginning of this new year, he hasn't shown up either. His name's Kenta. And it seems like maybe this is always, because Saku talks about it like, right, he had to do a lot of this maybe his first year as well. And I'm curious to see if that's kind of the nature of this story, where it's like, is this Kenta thing going to be the thing that continues throughout the season, and we build all these dynamics and relationships between Saku and the girls around him? Or is it going to be a thing of, because I think I remember reading the general premise of the story like on Wikipedia, but once again, I don't remember if I'm conflating this with something else, but it seems like maybe it's kind of like he kind of acts as kind of like, hey, I solve issues at the school. That kind of seems to be like maybe that would be the jux of like the entire story. The Kenta thing is just this section, but eventually it's different characters and stuff like that, and how he bounces off of those characters and how he approaches helping them with the help of the other long list of female characters around him in his quote-unquote harem. Because he's kind of regarded as kind of like this superhero. So I'm wondering, is there a little bit of like, does he have a bit of a hero's complex of one? Like, it's like, oh, I could easily choose. He's like, even tells the teacher, like, yeah, what if I refuse? But he's also kind of like, the teacher knows him well enough to know, like, well, you'll do it because that's just who you are personality-wise, What is a hero? It's just someone that obviously never gives up and just kind of wants to see things through. And it seems like we do have a little bit, I guess he's got a little rough around the edges aspects to his personality. He's not like and even one character, is it Asuka, I believe, says like, oh, you're imperfectly perfect type of situation. So that's probably the dynamic we got the most in this episode, the Asuka background, where like he approached like, hey, these kids were playing, having fun, and one fell in the water, and they're like, oh, we're going to leave you behind because you're dirty and messy. And then Saku was going to come over and reprimand them, but then here comes Asuka, who jumps in with the water and plays with the kid, and then like the kid starts playing with her, and then she convinces the other boys to play with him. So she seems like the weirdo girl, and they leave, but they're all leaving together. And I thought that was an interesting, just showcasing their perspectives, because Saku was like, you could have just helped the boy out of the water and then like, kind of told off and kind of scolded those other two kids. And she's like, yeah, but my approach was more fun. And also, at the end of the day, by doing that, all three of them had fun together. And yeah, they might look a little dirty and wet, but at the end of the day, they're leaving together. So there is something beautiful about that, because if I just scolded them, it would have just been kind of like oh, that kid's wet and he's okay, but these kids are probably pissed because they got scolded for you falling in the water. So it would have probably screwed things up with their relationship, especially as kids. But this way, it kind of approaches things different. Like, oh, this is the most like the best outcome in a way. And for her, like I said, it's mainly about this was the more fun approach because I get to jump into the water. But he's like, yeah, but like, now you're covered in, you're wet, and anyone that's passing by is going to have like their assumptions about you and stuff. But she's like, I don't care about that stuff. That's not important. So just kind of showcasing like, I guess Saku's like very I don't know, pragmatic, I don't know if it's the right word, but it's kind of like, even though we see, and I'm wondering if that's kind of why his approach to Kenta is the way it is, that he can be pragmatic, but he can be off the cuff as well. And I wonder if Asuka's influence played any role in that, his like off the cuffness. Because it seems like out of any character, some of the characters can see through him, like, what was it, Yuzuki, who was like, oh, hey, do you need my help with the Kenta thing? And he's like, oh, you already know about that? It's like, well, she's like the most like, she is like up there as like, along with Yuko, as like one of the goddesses, like one of the beauties top beauties at the school. But also like she's kind of like perfect in every regard, and it's kind of like a little, in his mind, like a little off-putting, like how perfect she is. So, but it's kind of like, yeah, like if you ever need me, I'm here. So I'm sure the time will come so we can explore that dynamic even more. But like going back to the Asuka of it all, she had asked this conversation like, okay, so what if you take the girl you're closest to at school and me, and we're in the water and you're in a kayak? You can only save one of us because the boat has only two spots on it. And it's like, he's like, couldn't one of you hold on to the side? She's like, oh yeah, there's sharks and piranhas in there. He's like, well, I wouldn't like be, for one, kayaking in water that's that deadly and, unfor real. But for and crazy, but for Asuka, it's like, I would like save you without hesitation, even like over the boy that I'm the closest to, just because I like you that much. And she's like, I know what you would do at the end of the day, and it's what I kind of figured he would as well, where it's just kind of like, yeah, I'll sacrifice myself and you both would be in the kayak. And she's like, yeah, that's just how you are. Because you'd look at it as like, oh yeah, like I had this beautiful death and stuff like that. And it's just kind of like, in his mind, that would be like the best outcome. And I don't know if that's also supposed to be an indictment and just more like he is the self-sacrificing type of person that, like I brought up before, like maybe he's overcompensating because like he leans into like, oh, I'm this villainous character because like I'm such a douchebag and this and that. But it could be him overcompensating because maybe he doesn't like himself, and maybe he doesn't like certain aspects of his life, even though he has this like very romanticized notion and talking about like, oh, like, I want to enjoy these days that I'll look back on when I'm older, as an old man, and kind of look at the charm and awesomeness of these days of my high school days and the wonderful things that happened around it. But like I said, maybe overcompensation to fill some void in himself. I don't know. But like the fact is, Asuka could see through him so well, in that capacity. I think it's just so fascinating because she says like, even if you're there with like your lips and your limbs and stuff like that being devoured, you'd still kind of say like, well, it was all kind of fun in the end. It was all kind of worth it in the end. Kind of end. So I just thought that was so interesting that she kind of saw through him so much. So first up, when he tries to approach Kenta, he plans on like, hey, I'm gonna go here, kind of gather some information first, then kind of decide a plan of action after the fact. So the first day there, he goes with Yua, and he says like, right, like I'm a very like love me or hate me type of person. You, Yua, are in a very unique position where you're someone who can kind of bridge that gap. So just who you are. So it's like people might be more inclined to open up to you. So they go see Kenta, and even his mom doesn't know why he stopped coming to school but this is also something the teacher said where he was like, sometimes there's certain things that only kids can understand other kids, but then there's also things where like only adults can understand other adults. It's just all about perspective of life and life experiences and circumstances that you can only, really truly understand to being a peer on either side of that like age group. And so that's Saku's approach, where it's like, hey, maybe he feels more comfortable telling something to someone his age, another student, than he is his mom. But when Saku introduces himself, Kenta knows exactly who he is. It's like, oh yeah, you're that man whore. And he was about to bust down the door, and Yua grabbed him and like, calm down, calm down. And then he's like, oh, she's like, hi, I'm Yua. And he's like, oh, you're one of those like basically floozies in his harem. And she was starting to get pissed off, and he had to tell her to calm down. So, it's like, right, we heard you're into manga and light novels. He's like, huh, though, you're going to try and connect with me, the nerd, right? Well, you wouldn't know about this series or this or that. And it's like, well, I don't. And you was like, I don't either, but I do read my little brother's like shonen manga from time to time. So it's like, right, let's talk. Like maybe you'll get to, maybe you can recommend some stuff to me. But at the very least, we can at least talk through the door. And that was kind of like the first like creeping steps forward, trying to get the conversation more so between him and Yua. And it gave Saku some insight on both parts because they're like, yeah, it seems like he really, really hates Saku. He was a little more open and willing to have a dialogue with Yua, but like anytime Saku was like involved, it like pissed him off and sent him like not spiraling, but just definitely irritated him. So it's like, all right, so something in that vein has to deal with this. So the next week he comes back, he's got Yuko with him. And that's a whole interesting dynamic where, like, Yuko, it's like, oh, I'm on the bike. And it's like, oh, be careful, your underwear might show. She's like, I don't care if some rando sees. He's like, well, then is it okay if I see? She's like, no, because you're special. He's like, wait, so it's okay with, like, I'm someone special, yet I can't see it, but it's fine with some rando seeing it? Because she's like, yeah, you should only see it when, basically almost like when something's happening between us, like, think on a more sexual front, it's when you should be able to see my underwear. So it's like, oh, that's just an interesting perspective she's got on that front. But Yuko's approach is she's a very, like, direct type of person. Like, she cuts around the fluff, and she's just very bluntly who she is in a very energetic and fun way. But once again, she's regarded as like one of the top beauties at their school and stuff like that. So when he's like, oh, wait, D, oh my God, that's crazy. But also like, you're one of the ladies in his life. But it turns into this conversation of he's like, you're only doing this just like Yua only came here to get brownie points with Saku. You're just trying to do the same. You just want to be number one. And she's like, well, of course. Why wouldn't I want to do something for somebody that I like? And he's like, see, so you admit. She's like, well, yes. Like, the fact is, like, he asked me to do him a favor, and I would happily oblige because it means I could work my way to being number one in his heart. Like, I know there are other girls and other people around him. And yes, it would hurt me in the long run if he ends up choosing someone else over me. But even if I don't end up being his number one, I will never regret. Essentially, I will never regret. It's better to have loved than lost than never loved at all. It's basically what it comes down to. I still appreciate. I know who he is. He's a kind person. People can feel how they want to feel about him, but he was kind to me. And even if he never chooses me at the end of the day, yes, it will hurt, but I will never regret the kindness and the niceness that he showed me. And so they're able to take away from that conversation. So that's what this stems from. Kenta felt like there was a girl he was nice to and things didn't work out. He felt like this person was using him, trying to be nice to him as a nerd, but like we don't know what the end result is, whether it's a misunderstanding on his part, whether he interpreted their dynamic a different way than this person did. And that's why he's kind of like, he's pissed off at Saku because it's more like you're so popular and you're so cool and it's easier for you to kind of like gel and have this dynamic. Like, because for one, it's like, once again, you're a man whore. You have all these girls who easily like you and you're not getting your heart broken, at least not that you know of. But it's like, yeah, like it's so easy for you. For others, it's kind of like crushing when it's just like, yeah, you put all this effort because you think like, oh, maybe this person feels the same way. And then to find out maybe they were just using you for some other reason. They were being nice to you for some reason, whether it's like, maybe he's thinking this person's trying to get brownie points with another person and trying to like look at him as like a charity case, or maybe this person is doing it just to be mean, where it's like, hey, I'm going to be nice to you and approach you and like get close to you just so I can like make you realize like and hurt you in the end by, oh God, the way I'm trying to phrase this, if you're familiar with Dandadan, how Ira's introduced, like when you first meet Ira in the story, I was wondering if it's like, could he be the Okurun in this situation? At least Okurun was completely unaware of like, oh, like Ira was like messing with him. But I'm wondering if it could be a similar dynamic as what I'm trying to say, at least with that example. So obviously he wants to be on the other side of the door and he kind of wants to be able to put himself out there, but I think it's just he's scared and he's just afraid of being hurt again, and so like I said, we don't know the true ins and outs. We'll probably have a better idea next episode, the real ins and outs of how that whole thing operates. But then you have Sokka being like, all right, cool, you're not going to open the door for any reason. Okay. So he's like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to break this to you, Kenta's mom. And then we see him swinging a bat and breaking through Kenta's like window of like the balcony or whatever. And it's like, yep, time to open up and here we go. So I was like, that's where I was bringing up earlier about the very like, well, his approach up until now had been very offbeat, but this is even more offbeat. Like, are you going to pay for those damages? I guess at the end of the day, if you're able to get her son out, she's okay with it. But like I said, maybe he's just offering to cover the damages, or maybe the school, because he's technically maybe in the employ of the school doing this, they'll cover the damages. I don't know how that's all going to play out next episode, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens, how Saku continues to approach this with the little knowledge they have and kind of fully explore what that whole situation actually is. So I should also note, like, I was kind of confused because this episode's like 49 minutes long. I was like, that's an interesting runtime for a first episode. It's really like 30 some, because then we hit the credits. I was like, yo, are they pulling an Invincible episode 1 where like we have an extremely long post-credit scene? It's like, no. Well, we kind of do, but it's like it's behind the scenes stuff, because I stopped it like partway through it, but basically it's two of the voice actresses kind of hosting a like behind the scenes thing. So I haven't finished watching that. I stopped it partway through that, so I'm going to watch the rest of that after this recording. And if something of note, like, I don't think anything pertaining to the episode, like in the contents of the episode, like I said, it's going to probably be a lot of behind the scenes stuff. But if anything interesting or note I really want to talk about, I'll probably like edit it into this part of the recording. But otherwise, I'll just kind of end things here. So, but really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.